Let's introduce our speaker for today, Adam Lewinberg. He is the president of Postal Advocate Inc., the only mail audit and recovery firm in the US and Canada. We manage a portfolio of over 61,000 pieces of mailing equipment for the largest US companies. He speaks and teaches nationally on mail savings and industry trends. He is the industry co-chair for the Boston Postal Customer Council, and he is a member of the Mail Systems Management Association with certifications in mail and distribution system supplier and mail piece design. He's a featured writer for Mailing Systems Technology magazine, and he worked for one of the largest mailing vendors for over 17 years as the director of national sales for Presort, tabletop inserters, addressing, hardware, software, and green offerings. He was one of the top 5 account managers nationally, working with some of the nation's top accounts. Just so that you know, Postal Advocate is not affiliated with any mailing vendors, so we offer unbiased advice.
A topic that frankly, there isn't much information out there, and we've done some extensive research that we're going to share with you about what's available for lost postage. And surprisingly, there's a lot of money. We found millions of dollars for our clients in lost postage, so we're going to show you how you can do this on your own, or if you need help from the experts, we're happy to help you with it. So first off, an overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what is dormant postage. Why do these funds get lost? And there are a bunch of reasons on that. Where do we get our information? We'll give you our sources, so hopefully you can have some credibility behind this information. Where does the money go after it gets lost? How much money is out there? We have some estimates that we're going to share. How do you search for your money? And there's some specific ways. What can be done to avoid this in the future? And this is the biggest thing, is that if accounts are set up correctly, this can be avoided. How can Postal Advocate help? And there are ways that we can do this for you, or just give you some quick advice. And then what are some other areas of postage and equipment savings that you may be interested in? We're averaging 60% savings for our clients around their equipment needs, and there are some things you may be interested in. So first off, what is dormant postage? In our mind, dormant postage are funds that haven't been used in at least a year and are most likely forgotten. So we typically find money that's sitting in a couple different places. It might be in your postage meter funding account, so you might prepay money into a postage meter account. It might be sitting on the actual postage meter. We found meters sitting in closets or haven't been used in years with large balances on them. The largest balance we ever found on a meter that was sitting in a closet was $140,000, and it was sitting there for, I think it was about 10 years it had been sitting there before we found that he helped them find the meter and get their money back. In unused permits, so lots of people have different permits throughout their organization, business reply permits or bulk mail permits, or permits used to fund mailings for a mail house that's out of state. So all those permits, if they're not, is anyone managing the balances on those? And then finally, at the state's unclaimed property offices. So one of the mailing equipment vendors turns funds over to the states as unclaimed property, and we have a huge database of accounts we found from those unclaimed property offices. So why do these funds get lost? So the top reasons that we find is office closures, mergers, acquisitions, or return meters. So think about, large organizations, and they're constantly ebbing and flowing with companies. So, or, there's a downsize in a company. And so they get rid of some of their postage meters. 25% of all postage meters in the United States have been returned over the last, basically since 2008. And so it's just this ebb and flow of companies. So as those things happen, are people going back and checking their meter balances? What if you change vendors? What if you're using Pitney Bowes and you switch to Neopost, or Neopost and you switch to Stamps.com? Does anybody think to go back and get the money for the old postage during that transition? The other big reason is when people send in money, so let's say someone sends in $5,000 for postage. It's a deposit onto a postage meter account most of the time, or it's used to pay an advance account where you've advanced $5,000 into your meter. In both of those situations, the money isn't used yet. The money's deposited onto a meter or onto a postage account. Most people assume when they send that $5,000 in that money's expensed. But in actuality, it's a bank account and it's an asset for the organization. Another big reason is there's 2 ways to fund postage meters. You can either prepay postage, think of it like a checking account, or you can borrow funds from the vendor using an advance account, where basically they're loaning you money. Think of it like a credit card. So what we find is that sometimes people use an advance account and money sits in the prepaid, or vice versa, because the funds aren't being actively managed. If you have a lot of locations in many organizations, there's no central visibility to the funds. So with that fragmented control, funds get lost. You have a lot of people that own this mailing expense category in different companies where if it's not a dedicated role for them, it's just a side job, that they may not have the expertise to be able to manage it. And with permits are all over the place. Permits get forgotten. They're typically fragmented. I mean, think about the average organization. Maybe they have a business reply account in their marketing group, maybe a separate one in accounts payable, in accounts receivable for their bills. Maybe their marketing group has multiple permits they use to fund different types of mailings they're using. So what happens over the years when people stop doing those projects or switch to email marketing or do different things? Does anyone check the permit balances on all those permit accounts? So if you have one location, it's one thing, but imagine you have 50 or 100 locations or 1,000 locations like we experience with many of our clients. It's very difficult to know that all those business reply accounts or all those permit accounts got closed out properly. Marketing. So marketing has standard permits at different post offices based on where the mailings take place. So when you use mail houses, many of them require that you take out permits, and you have to take out permits where the mail house is located in depositing the mail. So, and then finally, field offices, like we said, with their own business reply accounts or postage due accounts, and it's just usually those are managed by the location versus at a central visibility perspective. So those are the main reasons we see funds getting lost. So we've done some extensive research on this, and I don't expect you to read all this slide, but I want to just maybe talk a little bit about the work that we did and like what prompted us to be in this place talking about lost postage. So we tried to figure out what happens to lost funds. I mean, just from the basic meter perspective, someone turns in a postage meter, there's money sitting in the postage meter, there's money sitting in 1 to 2 different postage accounts linked to that meter vendor. Does the person who turns that meter in keep track of the balance that was in the meter, make sure that money got back to the account, go online on the meter vendor's website, fill out that form, submit it electronically to the vendor, wait for the money to get back to them, validate they got the check, and then cross that task off? And we know that just doesn't happen. I mean, there's just too many steps in that process that things are going to fall through the cracks. So we started looking at the unclaimed funds databases. We started to say, what happens to this money? And we found in about 15 states, we have a database of 22,000 lost Pitney Bowes transactions, where Pitney Bowes has basically turned funds over to the states as unclaimed property for different, probably from the majority of it, different postage meter accounts. And those just in 15 states where we were able to buy the entire database. So we know this is out there. And Pitney Bowes, by the way, this is no dig on Pitney Bowes. They actually, send notifications prior for, multiple years trying to get people their money back. But a lot of people just forget to get their money back, or maybe the person they're sending the bill to is no longer there. So then we did multiple Freedom of Information requests to the USPS because we didn't find any information. So we found 22,000 lost Pitney Bowes transactions. We didn't find a single one turned over to the states from the United States Postal Service. And we found out because they don't turn the funds over. So we did multiple Freedom of Information Act requests to figure out, well, what happens to that money? We had meetings with different USPS account managers and people in higher levels of management to figure out what happens to these funds. Where are they? Can you quantify them? And we didn't get any good answers. So we wrote the January 14th cover article for Mailing Systems Technology issue that says, has the post office been holding millions of dollars of mailers' money? Then this prompted a discussion with the United States Inspector General for the Post Office, and they did a research project for, we believe because of the reasons that we started this, called Dormant Advance Post Deposit Permit Accounts. And you can see that's a cover sheet of that. If anyone's interested in the article, we can email them a link. They acknowledge that when these funds are transferred, they're transferred as income to the United States Postal Service. So we'll go more into the details of that. But basically, after 2 years of inactivity, and no one claiming the money, the post office claims it as income to the Postal Service. So we wrote the January 15th cover article for Mailing Systems Technology to expose some of this. And since then, I've had subsequent meetings with Inspector General's office, as well as some of the higher VPs at the Postal Service. To still no avail and no direct answers as far as how the post office is planning on fixing some of this, the way that they're handling permits. But from this, we're able to, from all this research that you can see, we've been able to ascertain a lot of information that we want to share. So the first thing is, where does this money go? So Neopost, Hassler, and Franca Typostalia basically the post office controls their money. It's the post office's bank. So when you have a postage meter from those vendors, they keep records of it. They notify you that you have, an account at one point, that there's funds in it. The question is, how frequently do they notify you? And after a notification or two, do they keep notifying you? And in most of the cases, the answer is no. And it's sort of the onus is on you to go collect it. But the USPS basically controls that money. Pitney Bowes, because they have their own bank that's located in, I believe, Utah, they get to control their own money. So that's the reason that they're required to turn their funds over to the states as unclaimed property, which we believe they do after they've held the money for 2 to 5 years. And it's different based on each state. Now, here's the part that's the worst, is the permits. So permits, all the funds stay at the USPS. So after 2 years of inactivity, they send you a single letter. And they said, if you do not retrieve your funds in 60 days of notice, we'll transfer it to a different GL account, and then we consider it income. So you have 2 years before the post office basically, 2 years and 2 months before the post office basically can turn your money over and create income to the Postal Service for it. There's no other notifications that are sent after that notification after 2 years, but the money can be redeemed if the customer has proof of the account. So what we find is, we just don't believe this is a very effective process. If any, there's $55 billion, we believe, in the state's unclaimed funds offices for money that's required to be turned over by organizations. And those organizations could be, corporations, could be, nonprofit organizations, they could be state agencies. They have to turn money over to the state's unclaimed funds office. The post office, a federal agency, doesn't have to turn the money over, doesn't have to keep it visible and make it there so you can see it. And after 2 years, they basically consider it income for them, and they keep your money, unless you can do some proof after the fact that you actually had money with them. So we're trying to change that. We're trying to push anyone at the Postal Service, but that's the status as of right now about what happens. So how much money is out there? So this is our estimates. Obviously, we don't have any set facts. No one's published any specific information, but we have some data points that are helpful. So in the U.S., since 2008, the number is 27% of all postage meters have been turned in. So in February 2008, there was 1.5 million postage meters. In February 15, there was 1.1 million. That number has since gone down. So we know there's a huge percentage of meters that have canceled. In the 15 states that we researched, we have a database of 22,000 transactions where the funds were turned over from Pitney Bowes. The total value we estimate on those 22,000 transactions is $4.9 million. We estimate if all states were there, that's $15 million. So during fiscal year 2012 and 2013, when the Post Office did that research study for us, they claimed $15.6 million of customers' unclaimed dormant account balances as income to the Postal Service during the same time frame. So during those 2 years, of all the transactions they found that were dormant, the Post Office basically transferred $15.6 million of customer money to their coffers and counted it as income for that year. So when we look at this and we look across all these factors, this is our estimates. We think in postage meter funds, there's about $30 million. $15 million turned over to the states from Pitney Bowes, another $15 million still sitting at either the different meter vendors, including Pitney Bowes, that is dormant, that is allowed to be refunded. Based on the fact that we found $15.6 million in those 2 years of the Postal Service, if we extrapolate that over a 10 or 15 year period, we think there's about a $78 million. So we estimate there's probably about $108 million of lost postage out there. Now, if you look at our recoveries, you can see, sometimes we find huge transactions, sometimes it's lots of small ones. But, we have recovered over $2.2 million of lost postage. But as of, basically the beginning of September, last week we had our biggest single postage claim that's not reflected in these numbers. We found a single postage account that we were able to help the client with for $671,000. And so the money's out there. Sometimes it's big, or sometimes it's lots of small transactions that can add up. And you can see a small package delivery client we found 80 lost postage transactions for $478,000. A banking client we have with 46 transactions for $258,000. So the money's out there. Sometimes it's big transactions, sometimes it's small. It's across all different industries. There isn't one place we're seeing it. We see it everywhere. So the next question is, how do you search for your money? Okay, so let's start out with postage meters. First thing to do is you want to find out your account numbers of any current and past postage meters. So it's very important to know what your funding accounts were. And there's usually two account numbers. There's a prepaid account number and there's an advance account number. It's important to know both. So you want to enter these account numbers online on the vendor's website to see if you can see any data available. Do you see any balances? Do you see any transactions? And then contact your meter vendor to validate what funds are available in these accounts. If you can't see the data of the balances on the online system, contact the meter vendors to figure out what funds are available. Once you've figured out what funds are dormant, fill out the meter refund forms on the vendor's websites. And then also check unclaimed funds websites to see if money was turned in. And this is for Pitney Bowes only. And so some tips for working for the states. We normally recommend most states' unclaimed funds offices wrap up to missingmoney.com, and that wraps up probably about 60% of the states out there. But if you have offices that were in certain states, you may want to check that specific state. It might be easier to search, and they may have more information. So you want to check with the states where the meter was returned and try multiple naming conventions. You know, if you use the example of AT&T, just as an example, AT&T could be written out in so many different ways. It could be A-T ampersand T. It could be A space T space ampersand space T. It could be A-T space A-N-D T. So you have to check a bunch of different ways that it's written, because if you're not exact, you won't find the money. Make sure you have proof of the address and the business name, and in some cases that you had a vendor relationship. So you have to make sure, if you're trying to claim money from the states, make sure that you can prove that you had an address on 1 Main Street in Boston, Massachusetts, and usually they need some sort of, document that shows a bill or something that you've paid at that address. And in some cases they need a proof that you had a relationship with that vendor. Submit the claims through the state's websites and then keep detailed records to follow up. So this is the way that we recommend searching for money for postage meters. If it's not turned over to the states and it's with the meters, like I said, it's a simple process typically of just filling out the meter refund request form that all the vendors have. So now let's say it's permits. So what we recommend is build a listing of current and past permit numbers. This sounds easy, but it's not always simple for companies, because most companies, it's so fragmented that they don't have a single list. The best way that we found to do this is go to accounts payable and do an export of the last 5 or 10 years of payments that you've made to organizations like United States Postal Service, USPS, Postmaster, and those are some of the key names that postal transactions will typically come under. And from that, you can see where you were paying for permit type transactions, and that gives you a great place to start. A lot of times in the accounts payable files, there's a reference field that might give a permit number or might give the office of the post office that you had worked with. Then work with your USPS account manager requesting a list of any permits. In some cases, if you're big enough, the post office can provide you some support in saying, who do they show your relationship with? The thing you've got to be concerned about is if you've done acquisitions or mergers or things like that, or have had name changes, usually their search for companies is very rudimentary, and it's based on everybody under your business name. And if you had, like I said, acquisitions or different divisions, you just got to make sure that they're pulling that stuff in. Then, once you've identified the funds, reach out to the local postmasters of the closed permits to see what details they have and can they validate the balances. And then once you've validated the balances, fill out a Form PS, Form 3533, Application for Refund of Fees, Products, and Withdrawal of a Customer Accounts form, and that's how you get your money back. So Doris, you're going to do a quick poll where we're just going to ask you one simple question just to get some feedback about how everybody handles this today. Okay. How do you track remaining postage balances with your fleet when changing equipment? So select one. I rely on the vendor to provide the refund. I don't track the postage refund. I didn't know lost postage existed. I track all meters on a spreadsheet. I have so many meters I can't keep track. So just click on one of those. Did the responses come up? Okay, so you can see I rely on the vendor to provide the refund, 33% rely on that. The problem with that is you need to request it on their request forms, and the vendors don't always make that obvious. I don't track postage refunds, and you can see 33% responded that way. I didn't know lost postage existed, or I track all meters on a spreadsheet. I have so many meters I can't keep track. So the interesting thing is, 17%, potentially proactively, go after these funds, and the remainder may not have complete visibility or may, rely on a vendor to do it. So it's just to show that it's just not the top of mind type topic, which is why you're probably all here on this call. Thanks, Doris. Okay, how do you avoid this from happening in the future? So this is the key piece of it, because there are lots of ways to do this where this doesn't happen. So first, you want to get a report from your vendors that lists out, for your postage meter vendors, that lists out your account numbers, and every meter account has multiple different account numbers that it's important to know. Usually have an installed account number. If you place a service call or order supplies, it's the main number that that vendor references. You might have a lease number, a prepaid postage account number, or an advanced postage account. It's important that you know all of those. Your lease information, know your lease rate, term, end of lease dates, what items are covered, meter rentals and maintenance agreements, model and serial numbers and descriptions of each item. Enter these account numbers onto the vendor's website. All the vendors have decent websites that can give you at least some preliminary information about your spends. Then monitor your inventory of equipment, invoices, and postage balances online, and that way you can keep track of, are there meters attached to the account? Is there activity on accounts? Find all active locations with equipment, and then this is the big one, if it's possible, centralize accounts payable for equipment and postage. So what happens with that, let me give you a little bit more detail. The biggest cause of lost postage is that office, you have an organization, let's say with 50 sites or 30 sites, and every office funds their own postage meter. And so they send checks individually for a specific account number. So then the office closes, people forget that there was money in that account, and that money just sits there dormant. A best-in-class practice is to link all of those postage accounts as a single account. So you fund one postage account, and then all 30 or 50 offices draw off that balance. So when that meter gets turned in, because it's not being used anymore, the funds go back to the main account that everybody else can use. The money never gets lost. So that's a best practice if it's possible. Enter all USPS permanent accounts into the business gateway. So the post office has a website called the Business Gateway that can consolidate all, and for visibility purposes only, all of your activity with them and all your different accounts. And it can make it very easy. You can also set up a CAPS account, which is like a centralized postage meter account, where you can basically pay for all your funding for your permits from one account. But then the biggest thing is to set up a schedule for continual review. You can't just set this up and then let it ride. You have to review it every month or a couple months to make sure that you're in charge of the balances on each of these accounts. So how can Postal Advocate help? So we've hopefully given you some tools as far as what you can do on your own to get this money. If you need help from the experts, we, for all clients, do a risk-free savings analysis where there's no obligation or cost to it, where we quantify if we found any lost postage for you, what are the savings across your organization around mail equipment spends, and fees. We have no vendor affiliation, so we're completely unbiased in what we recommend, and we've helped our clients save and recover millions of dollars in fees, overcharges, and lost postage. I think we're up to around $4 million in total across those categories. We're averaging 60% savings on equipment for our clients. And the majority of the times, they're not required to switch vendors. So they keep with their same vendor, but we figure out ways to get their cost down by 60% is our average. The range has been 37% to 92%. So this totals $25 million since 2013 for our clients. Every one of our staff has worked in the mailing industry for years. We have a combined 250 years of mailing experience. And then we have tools that make this easy for you. So we manage your assets and bills. We're looking at every invoice. We're looking at every piece of equipment to make sure that it's the right fit. And then we provide a web dashboard, which is better than anything the vendors provide, to make sure that you've got visibility to what's going on across all your accounts. And the best part for most accounts is we don't charge for our services. We only share in a small piece of any savings or recovery. So what are some areas of postage and other equipment savings? So like we've talked about, the 60% savings that we find in equipment right sizing. We find companies spending tens of thousands of dollars in vendor fees, late fees, finance charges, equipment insurance, loyalty programs they didn't know that they had, that we get eliminated. And this has amounted to, I think, about $500,000 for our clients. Vendor overcharges, like, are you getting billed at the right rates? And we find lots of companies, are paying for equipment that they no longer have or use, or they've been double paying for equipment from a lease and from a meter rental that was supposed to be covered. And we've found, I think, over like $800,000 or $900,000 in these sort of vendor overcharges that people are paying that we've gotten refunds back for the clients. And then providing this sort of web-based dashboard that just makes it easy to go to one website and see your entire portfolio in one place. And that's for all your postage, for all your meters, for all your equipment, and it can also be added permit accounts if needed. So it's a single place for visibility across all mail spends. And we don't charge for that for the majority of our clients, and it's just included as part of our savings program. So if you are interested in having us look at any of your spends, what we do is we do a no-cost analysis, and the only thing that we need in order to do that is a single-page limited agency agreement that gives us the authority to look at your mailing spends on your behalf. And then we ask you either provide us copies of vendor invoices or an accounts payable export, and we'd request the criteria, or a location list with equipment if you have one. Some clients have them, some don't. And then from there, in 2 to 3 weeks, we can do a complete analysis for you of what savings we think we can find or what lost postage we can identify being available. And then if you decide you want to go forward, then we take care of getting you the credits and submitting the lost postage funds and helping you negotiate your mailing equipment agreements with your vendors, and then working with your locations to do, to validate that you have all the equipment that's out there, that we right size and do terminates. And then we present all savings to you for approval. We provide a dashboard like we talk about, and we give ongoing support. Usually this isn't like a one-time thing. You can just clean it up because people have leases and different agreements at all different stages. So we keep managing it. So we're always looking for ways to reduce costs inside your portfolio. So most of our clients are some of the largest organizations in the country. We've worked with 8 of the top 25 banks in the country, 3 of the top 4 uniform companies are our clients, 3 of the top 10 insurance companies, 1 of the top 2 pharmacy chains. So they're literally the biggest companies with the biggest portfolios. We're managing a portfolio now of about 62,000 pieces of mailing equipment. And like I said, on average, we're saving our clients 60% because nobody else has the type of insight on this category. And that's why our savings numbers are so high. So, like I said, it's been $25 million of savings, an average of about $700,000 per client, and 60% on average. So, in summary, there's a huge amount of lost postage available, and the levels are increasing. We expect lost postage amounts to increase over time because as more and more meters, get turned in, which is inevitable to happen as people move more to electronic delivery, people are going to get rid of more and more of their meters, and there's less and less expertise in the mailing industry through that downsize. And what happens is people are going to forget to go after this money, so we know it's there. This postage gets lost due to this fragmented process many organizations have. Many organizations don't have one person that controls all the postage, that has everything under one centralized account. It's very fragmented and spread out. And so when you have those fragmented processes, it leads to loss. Money can be found and recovered if you're willing to put the work into it. So it's not easy to do it, but there are methods that hopefully our guide gave you the information about, where you can do the work, you can do the research, and you can find this money. This can be avoided if you set up the right model for visibility and oversight. So the way to eliminate this for the future is to set up so you control the data, and so you're looking at it at a frequent basis to make sure these things aren't getting lost. And if you need help from the experts, Postal Advocate's here for you. I don't want to say we invented this category, but we were the first ones that we've heard of that actually paid attention to it, and from any sort of scale. And we're clearly, hopefully you can see from this, we're the experts in this space. and know every way possible of trying to find and recover these types of funds. So I want to thank everybody for being on this call. We have webinars scattered throughout the year on different topics. You can register for those webinars at postaladvocate.com or contact Doris Tam at postaladvocate.com to make sure that you're registered. The next webinar we're doing should be in the next 30 to 60 days, and we'll send out notifications to everyone on this call. It's the ultimate tour, how to look at the multi-location fleet management system we call Enterprise Advocate, how you can look at your data in a completely different way to have that visibility that we're talking about to make sure you're optimizing your fleet. But hopefully you can make that, and we'll send you notifications of different upcoming events.